Hi everybody, Travis here. Before we get into the summary, I wanted to provide a little bit of additional context. I had finished reading this book and actually recording and even editing the summary prior to the events of the last couple weeks with the death of George Floyd and the protests that have happened as a result of that. I didn't talk about it very much in the original summary, but this book really is about Sandra Bland. The first and the last chapters are about her, retelling the story of her encounter with the police officer that led to her detainment and her eventual suicide. And there is even an entire chapter dedicated to the Kansas City experiments, which were a set of experiments related to policing strategy and methodology that I think are more relevant than ever in the current atmosphere. So while my original summary, as you'll see, focused a lot on the psychology and the cognitive biases aspect of it, which is of interest to me always, I think that there's much more to the book in the current environment. And I just wanted to point that out. You'll hear the name Sandra Bland, and I don't talk about it at great length, but in the actual architecture of the book overall, she's very much present. It very much focuses on her. And after all, an interaction with a police officer and a citizen is one of the most dangerous and most intense encounters with a stranger that anybody can have. And we've obviously learned a lot more about that in the last couple of weeks. So please keep that in mind and enjoy the original summary. Thank you.
Today, let's start with an exercise. I'm going to list a series of people. You will recognize many, most, or perhaps all of them. I want you to think about what all of these people have in common. Ana Montez, Bernie Madoff, Jerry Sandusky, Larry Nassar, Amanda Knox, Brock Turner, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Adolf Hitler, Sylvia Plath, Sandra Bland. What you might think at first is that all of these people are associated with high-profile cases and/or crimes, either as the perpetrator, an accused, or as the victim. But what Malcolm Gladwell talks about in his latest book, Talking to Strangers, is something more fundamental that unites all of them. In one way or another, all of these people were deeply misread. Talking to Strangers posits two fundamental questions, puzzles, per Gladwell's terms, and three answers to them in the form of cognitive biases or flaws in perception that answer them. Each of the two puzzles and the three answers is presented in the form of the compelling story of one of those people listed above, and how they were misinterpreted or misread in one or more particular ways that we all, by our nature, have a tendency to fall prey to. The first question emerges from a story of Cuban spies and double agents that were running rampant through the CIA during certain parts of the Cold War. The CIA was so thoroughly compromised by Cuban and East German spies during some periods of time that East German spy chief Marcus Wolf once was able to say confidently, "We were in the enviable position of knowing that not a single CIA agent had worked in East Germany without having been turned into a double agent or working for us from the start." Puzzle 1 is, why can we not tell when the stranger in front of us is lying to our face? The next question, or puzzle, comes from the unfortunate tale of British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, who met personally with Adolf Hitler in the 1930s in an attempt to stave off war in Europe, and who, now infamously, came back from that meeting and said, "I believe it is peace for our time," less than 6 months before Hitler's invasion of Poland. A tangential investigation of bail judges in the United States and their history and accuracy with predicting repeat offenders tells the exact same tale in a much different form. Puzzle 2, why is it that a face-to-face interaction can sometimes make us worse at interpreting a stranger? So, what are the answers to these questions? In short, why are we famously bad at being able to understand strangers, even in what historically appears to be very obvious scenarios? Answer number 1 is the default to truth. The stories of Ana Montez, the Stanley Milgram obedience experiments, and Bernie Madoff in particular all highlight this bias. Ana Montez was suspected and even formally investigated years before she was finally outed as a Cuban double agent. In the famous and controversial Stanley Milgram experiments on obedience, nearly half of participants sensed that something was amiss, but continued delivering electric shocks to participants at the urging of an experimenter. Harry Markopolos spent nearly a decade warning various federal and financial protection agencies about Bernie Madoff's scheme and not being heeded. Why? Gladwell describes default to truth as, you believe someone not because you have no doubts about them. Belief is not the absence of doubt. You believe someone because you don't have enough doubts about them. It takes an exceptionally dodgy situation or a particularly neurotic individual to overcome this bias. And while it is a bias, it's also key to understand that this bias provides essential social glue. If we didn't default to truth in aggregate as a society, people wouldn't drive on public roads, work together at companies, perform economic exchange, trades of goods and services. They probably wouldn't even form relationships and procreate. So what's to be done? Well, first, there's still more complexity to introduce yet, because default to truth is not the only answer to why we're so bad at interpreting strangers. There are two more answers that Gladwell has yet to present. The second of these answers to why we're so bad at interpreting strangers is the assumption of transparency. Gladwell describes the assumption of transparency as, we tend to judge people's honesty based on their demeanor. Well-spoken, confident people with a firm handshake who are friendly and engaging are seen as believable. Nervous, shifty, stammering, uncomfortable people who give windy, convoluted explanations aren't. The people we all get right are the ones who match, whose level of truthfulness happens to correspond with the way they look. Recalling the list of names from earlier, Bernie Madoff and Amanda Knox, disparate as their stories seem, are really two sides of the same coin. Madoff got away with the largest Ponzi scheme in history for more than a decade because he appeared level-headed, reasonable, professional, and competent. Amanda Knox was held in jail for 4 years on spurious evidence because of an awkward social demeanor and unexpected presentation. The final reason that Gladwell asserts we're so bad at interpreting the stranger is that we fail to adjust our expectations for the context that they're operating in. So answer 3 is coupling. I've already been a little bit long-winded in repeating examples from the book, so I'll just give you a teaser for this one. The stories of Brock Turner, the Stanford student convicted of sexual assault due to his actions at a fraternity party, and Sylvia Plath, the dark, brooding, confessional poet famous for her dark works and eventual suicide, are both cautionary tales in understanding context. If you're interested in how either of their stories could be misinterpreted or misunderstood, you owe it to yourself to pick up the book. What Malcolm Gladwell's writing does so well is it forces the reader to embrace complexity. By highlighting and pointing out both sides of the equation so poignantly, he destroys the notion of black and white binary thinking. If we never challenge our existing beliefs, if we never investigate our perspectives, if we never actually listen to people who are unlike us, we start to think of ourselves as exactly right, and anyone who opposes us as idiots or evil idiots. Talking to strangers is peak Gladwell in that it forces you to embrace the idea that every person you come across is the main character of their own story, a rich individual with a complex history and set of views that cannot be easily simplified or put into a dogmatic, ideological box. Gladwell's ultimate takeaway is that we should accept the limits of our ability to decipher strangers, and what is required of us is restraint and humility. While this has been a pretty good summary, not to toot my own horn or anything, with Gladwell, the journey is the destination. The way he tells the stories is so compelling and so engaging that even if you think your mind is made up, you might just be wrong when you read it in his words. If you bristled at any of the names or the stories or the conclusions that I talked about in this summary, that is a compelling indication that you should pick up the book for yourself. Don't fall into the trap of overconfidence and of thinking that all of your preconceived notions are exactly right in all of these cases. They may end up being correct, but you will never really know unless you poke at them and test them and try them. So, embrace nuance, complexity, and humility, and resist the allure of overconfidence. Malcolm Gladwell, Talking to Strangers, highly, highly recommended. Thank you as always for tuning in and watching this. Your viewership and engagement is always appreciated, and if you want to engage more, I've actually created a few new avenues for you to do that. I've now got a Facebook page called Trav Talks that you can check out and follow if you want to see all of my content. You can also subscribe below on YouTube if you want to see my videos live. And in line with that new Facebook page that you can follow, I'm launching a new series called Trav Talks, where I'm going to present some of my perspectives on things and issues, some of my projects that I want to present, in addition to the book reviews that I hope you have come to know and enjoy. You can also now support me on Patreon if you'd like at patreon.com/TravisLane. You can become a supporter for a $3 per month pledge or a VIP supporter for $5 per month. My goal for this channel is always to keep the content ad-free. That pledge to me helps me know that the content is valuable to you. It helps me keep that content ad-free. And for VIP supporters, there may be some incentives like early releases or bonus content not available to everybody in the near future. Again, thank you for watching. I hope this has been educational, informative, and maybe a little bit interesting to you. And I hope to talk to you again very soon.